Have you ever been up close and personal with a jonquil or daffodil or any flower in the Narcissus family and experienced their fragrance? It just so happens to be that the Narcissus or jonquil note is among my favorite floral notes in fragrance. And to kick off this series on spring florals, I want to discuss 5 fragrances that are in my collection that I find really represent this floral in its many aspects. Each one of these fragrances presents Narcissus and Jonquil in its own way, highlighting some of their characteristics rather. And I'd like to share this with you. So we'll just get into a little bit on Narcissus and Jonquil in perfumery. So there are actually 3 different types of species of this flower that are used in perfumery. The first is Narcissus poeticus, which is also colloquially known as the poet's daffodil, poet's narcissus, or pheasant's eye. Then there's the Narcissus tazetta, which you may be familiar with through paper whites. They may also be called bunched flower narcissus or bunch flower daffodil. And then there is the third species, which is Narcissus jonquilla, which we know as the jonquil. It is closely related to the garden daffodils or jonquils that we see all about in the springtime. Now, in addition to using these solvent-extracted absolutes, these perfume raw materials, we also find that there are synthetics that are used to build this accord. Because bear in mind that absolutes can only provide a certain aspect of the flower. It is a concentrated form of those scented oils, of those fragrant materials that come from the plant. So the headspace is missing from these naturals. So what perfumers do is they build them with other types of materials. That being said, the absolutes do contain a lot of what constitutes the headspace. So there are phenols, and there are esters of different types, alcohols, aldehydes, ketones, different terpene derivatives that are in these absolutes that are also found when examining the headspace of the flower. Now, there are many different synthetics that are often used to create a Narcissus accord in a fragrance composition, and the most noteworthy are cresol derivatives. So these include paracresol acetate, paracresol phenyl ether, paracresol isobutyrate, and others. And then these, to clarify cresols and cresol derivatives, cresol is a coal tar-like, medicinal, phenolic smelling compound. And it's also what lends sort of that horse-stable character that is the back note of Narcissus, which makes it unique to florals. In addition to that, you have a lot of other things like specific esters like phenylethyl, phenyl acetate, stearyl valerate, etc. So I don't want to get too complicated with this, but to give you an idea, there are these certain compounds that are found in larger quantities in the headspace of jonquils and narcissus. And it's fascinating, that there is this flower that can seem so beautifully narcotic, with shades of mimosa and orange flower and tuberose and black currant, a little bit of hyacinth. But then there's also these animalic shades. There's this hay and tobacco, and even a little bit of a coumarinic kind of aspect to the scent of these flowers. Powdery, spicy, green. Just remarkable, especially if you smell the poet's narcissus, which is the most fragrant of all the species. So, to get us started here, I wanted to share what is my lone Narcissus soliflor in my collection, and that is Penhaligon's Ostara. So, this was launched in 2015. Bertrand Duchefort is the nose behind this one. For your reference, the notes break down green leaves, violet leaf, aldehydes, juniper, clementine, bergamot, black currant blossom, mint, pink pepper, narcissus, hyacinth, beeswax, ylang ylang, wisteria, hawthorn, and cyclamen, with the base notes being vanilla, benzoin, amber, musk, styrax, and white wood. And it's worth noting the notes that are in this breakdown and how they flesh out the narcissus in this fragrance. For example, the appearance of that black currant blossom or that black currant accord, the hyacinth, the benzoin and styrax, and then also there's this beeswax that anchors all of it. So Ostara may be a difficult fragrance for those who aren't more intimately acquainted with the fragrance of Narcissus or Jonquils. It's really a vivid interpretation, replete with the waxy interior of the flower, the pollen, and the earth from which they are grounded. There's this supporting player of hyacinth, a fellow early spring bloom, for which I'll be doing a video next week. And there's also this dusty, spiced undercurrent. It's unctuous, yet it's bright. It's mildly animalic, and I think that beeswax really pushes that forward. It adds further dimension and seems to contrast wonderfully with the subtly chrysalic qualities of the Narcissus. So it is really true to life to my nose, and it also avoids verging on excessive horsiness that can be a shortcoming for more strident Narcissus-centered frags, but it's there. One might argue that this fragrance is editorial, such a realistic illustration in scent, but it makes it no less a joy to wear, even if its specificity may be a bit overwhelming for those who want their fragrances to have a healthy dollop of perfumism, while it can only really be found as it dries down into this musky, resinous base. Ostara for me is such a pleasure. It is winsome and hopeful, much like the springtime it represents. Moreover, it is unisex, arguably a floral that is right at home in a man's skin just as much as a woman's. And in fact, I mean, it's genderless, as all fragrances really are. Spring flowers, they're for everyone. Next in line is the second release from Roberto Greco's house. This is Portes Peau from his house, L'Objet Parfumant. So I'd like to read the review that I did for this one. So consider this sort of a recital of sorts to illustrate how this one makes me feel. And I'll begin. The pollen forming a galaxy in the cool spring air, the chill rendered bearable by the sun's higher angle. They say it's spring, this feeling light as a feather, as Blossom Dearie sang. Porte Peau, Wearing Your Skin, is the second release from photographer-artist Roberto Greco's L'Objet Parfumant, and it is the complement to his series of images that present memories as refracted through mirrors, misty, just out of focus. One entitled Reflecting My Narcissus brings us to the perfumed object we have here, composed by Rodrigo Flores Rue. And it greets me with aldehydes, not unlike the ones experienced in these 20s to 30s classics from Lanvin or Whale, with the spring yellow flowers and a gauzy musk, and the aroma of hawthorn blossoms at once downy and dirty, sweet and sinister, compounded by earthy, musky, angelica root. And what is brought into the foreground is this Narcissus. The flowers with their sunny faces looking at you as if you are their mirror. Green spiced anticipation, their cornets releasing their curiously animalic undertones into the pollen galaxy. A warm, salty skin envelops me now. I donned a new skin, one that is an amalgam of the tender and brutal myths. It's almost vertiginous in its effect, facets of just disrobed underthings tossed on the floor in sexy eyes, and the walk with this object of desire in the spring garden. They start to merge. The feeling of idyllic, vernal scenes superimposed over the erotic body lusting after more, giving into instinct. The use of Hierasium that becomes just ever so apparent sends me beyond the brink. Freshly laundered clothes saturated with the sweat of anticipation and freshly cut Narcissus on the nightstand. It is daylight, and we can wait no longer. Sex, sunshine, and nostalgia. Who could resist enjoying all three at once? Porte sa Peau is nothing less than brilliant, another gem after the breathtaking Ouye, the first release from Roberto Greco. Next is this release from 1974, Amazon from Hermès. The nose behind this fragrance is Maurice Morin. Top notes are galbanum, cassia, neroli, Brazilian rosewood, mandarin orange, bergamot, and violet leaf, with the middle notes narcissus, hyacinth, blackcurrant, rose, iris, orris root. Same difference? Or are they interpreting the iris flower as well as the root? Jasmine, raspberry, and lily of the valley, with the base notes being oak moss, vetiver, neroli, cedar, sandalwood, cinnamon, ylang ylang, and amber. Here are the cool leaves and stems dappled with dew during transitional seasons, either waxing or waning, full of promise or looking back longingly. Blooms burst open with the promise of the sun and recede into the shadows and the fog. There's a horizon at sunrise or at sunset. The full circle is felt more lucidly as each year passes. I'm somehow reminded of these truths when wearing Amazon. It is galbanum green, yet it foreshadows sweet, tender decline. Cassis berries and leaves punctuate the ripe hyacinths and narcissus. Ever so slightly wilting petals are still beautiful. Aging and decline are not to be feared, but embraced. Encased in iris and sweetened with berry damascone rose. So, this is crisp and woody, and it just envelops velvety and soothing. A moss salve in its dry down to mark the hunkering down for the approaching winter. And it's great to wear in autumn or in springtime. And that's Amazon. Next is a certified classic from Caron, Narcisse Noir from 1911. The nose behind this fragrance, Ernest Daltroff. This is a legendary fragrance in the Caron canon. Narcisse Noir, in this 90s iteration, is a sun-kissed Narcissus lifted by the balm of orange blossom, just as much apparent as the Narcissus here. And there's a shade of methylantranilate, which is a compound which contributes to the odor of orange blossom. And at points it almost suggests Concord grapes in the sun as well. There's this honeyed aldehydic radiance in the opening, and it soon converges with a sheer, almost dusty yet warm yellow impression of this floral heart, rendering the glow into a melancholy luminescence. There's a subtle hint of civet, or something civet-like, that I can discern in the dry down. It extends the floral heart with these traces of powder and pollen, and it lingers longingly on the skin. And the base is beautifully haunting and pensive. So this is another beautiful one. Narcisse Noir. Over 100 years. And next, I have Eau de Narcisse Bleu from Hermes. Oh, it's not Eau de Narcisse Bleu from Hermes. It's not. It's Grey Flannel. I actually think Eau de Narcisse Bleu Hermes smells so close to Grey Flannel because Grey Flannel, at least in more recent formulations, is just brimming with Narcissus. It was originally released in 1975, and it has a lot of green notes, galbanum, petitgrain, neroli, etc. People often associate it with violet and maybe some mimosa, which is apparent. But to me, what really stands out is this Narcissus accord throughout its development. And many argue that the older formulations are superior. I think that's a bit overblown. I think it's exceptional even in its more recent versions. It's been critically lauded. It is quite polarizing for younger folks. And because it's still a cheapie, folks who may have not graduated to more naturalistic green, floral, bitter smelling fragrances scoff at it and say that it smells really bad. They may always feel that way, or over time their mood may change, their perspective may change. It happens to a lot of us, especially those who develop a taste, develop our noses. So I'm just impressed with the opening, even in the more recent formulations. It showcases this realistic Narcissus, and it's just like the scent that you're greeted with when your nose approaches their blooms. It really does, to me at least. And I believe that supporting galbanum helps exalt the note quite wonderfully. I really honestly think this is one of the most Narcissus-forward fragrances. And can we talk about the dry down too? I mean, it does dry into this lovely violet. There's the mimosa, some geranium, a bit of like a, obviously we don't have too many naturals here. We know that this is synthetics done well. There's a magic to it. But we have like, an iris accord here too. And it just further transforms into this musky, mossy, sort of vetiver cedar base. That's a great coda to the whole wearing experience. So haters don't hate, appreciate. Open your mind and your nose to this classic. I mean, if you do want to search for an older one, fair enough. Best of luck finding one that has been protected from the elements. But I would say even, more recent formulations of this are great. If anybody's interested. This is an EA Fragrances version, and it's a 9DA3 batch code if you're one of those batch code nerds. But, yeah, I just couldn't help it to include Grey Flannel because I do think that it is a very Narcissus-forward fragrance. So next I do want to show you some of the honorable mentions here. Fragrances that we have here. Van Cleef & Arpels First, Chanel No. 19, Val de Nuit, don't want to pronounce that T, and also Geoffrey Vienne, and you see the rest of them there. Those are my honorable mentions. Tabac Tabou, Magie Noire, Jardin de Bagatelle, and those all have prominent Narcissus notes. And also, I wanted to share one of the Naturals notebooks from Nez Magazine, the Narcissus and Perfumery. This can be purchased from Lucky Scent or from the Nez website itself. Wonderful reference, great read. It tells you everything you want to know about Narcissus and Perfumery, how how it is, how it's grown, and the anatomy, the geography, the data, the history. Wonderfully illustrated and great photography. So check that out. That is at luckyscent.com or nay.com, I believe. So that will be it for me. I hope you enjoyed this. I will be doing 3 more videos for the Spring Floral series: Hyacinth, Violet, and Lily of the Valley. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell button for further notifications. And until next time, be well.